It might be delayed. Oops. It might be delayed. I'm just saying hello. It's got quite a delay. No, as soon as I'll turn up and then it'll start talking.
Work light going out.
To do it without. This is really. Okay, that's it. I am going to turn this.
Okay, can you put this one in the camera?
I guess what I can do is, do you know a way transfer? Yeah. Do you have a email or I can set it up. Okay, basically we don't use Facebook. But I don't know if they use different copy the file or something like this. Yeah, I'll send this. Okay, cool. So I'll link you to the someone and you can upload it.
Therese? No, mine. I got it. It's working.
So just having all of that and how that will impact on
Gosh, is it Saha? Right. Saha, can I get you singing on that show over there, please? Thank you.
whose access was required was different to demonstrating on the street. Just that. People who think
Maria? Maria. Cool, can I get you singing on that one? Cool.
Yeah.
And I can zoom in also. So do you prefer that really zoom? Like that zoom? Like
Yeah, like
from the
that.
check?
Yeah.
Or that one?
That's good. That's good. Any more than we'll kind of not. Yeah, that's
Okay.
Yes, guys. And then after that we have to need to. I want to go and get some shots outside.
Yeah.
But Therese, can this light stand and just batteries and like ready? Yep.
We have one battery charging outside. I have two batteries on me. I can't cut because of my camera. So I'm going to get you to be keeper of one of the other batteries. Actually, can you give it to Therese? If you have the long side. That's one spare. I have one spare too.
Yeah. I'll get you to open this up so you can get experience. Hey.
Are we doing it now?
She wants us to set the menu.
Okay, cool. So yeah, we're putting that corner over there. So, listen here, listen up here. And then you fold the legs out.
Okay.
Yeah. It goes almost one end. Do that last. So legs go all the way out and out there.
Do you guys have a spare micro SD?
Like, do we have a spare micro USB?
SD, micro SD.
Oh, whatever. A micro, like a really tiny one?
Yeah.
They're really tiny ones.
Yes, as it happens we do.
Yeah.
Okay, so is the camera?
Yeah, so and make sure that really tight because it does open up.
Just remember I have it and I'll get it back. I'll give it back to you.
Now, in the light bag, which is sitting up over there are lights. There's a foldable light as well as a rectangular light.
So in this bag?
Yeah, that's where the lights are. The light battery should be in there as well.
So then filters into, so that goes into one of the departments, and I do a lot of work in the culture business team, so spreading across all five departments.
Do you want the light on an adapter or? Huh? You want it on like the adapter?
So it's
How long are you here for? This is your last gig, is it?
You guys are all like,
Yeah, we're all.
you're all the time up and everything.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go see if I
There's
can.
a few
And which side would you like, Deborah? Yeah, cool.
So
I'll move this around
Yeah, it's really nice.
so you don't have to reach over.
Lovely.
Yes,
That can
you
go
can just
there.
try this.
I was going to put it the other way, so it was sort
Just
of
mix it up.
like that.
It's going to be integrated
So we
later.
both, it was accessible for both of us.
Clever. It's like there's that really great young architect, she worked on the Shard, talking about equity in in design. So if you look at, say, for example, like when you say with people, short people, women, like every set of toilets in every major building built by men, we thought, yeah, I'll just give them halves. Although, see, the only place you'll ever find that there's a longer queue for the men's toilets than the women's is always a matinee at a major theatre company. Hey, Eamon, how are you? Good, how are you? Good. Nice to see you. Is it really? Welcome.
So Amy will be introducing you both.
What do I have?
The back and side.
He just did an amazing show. Amazing show. It's so funny, I just wrote about it for somebody. Yeah, and weirdly, I was talking to Jake this morning about this, and he talked to Shakti this afternoon about I feel like I've been instructed.
So now I'm not doing those two ultimate, but I'm still listening. So
What are you going to
so soon, but it's okay. So you know how take one's just doing all this thing. So this particular one for instance, so there's a list.
No, I just got back from Adelaide last time.
And they were big parts.
That's pretty big, yeah. And a class of 19 all over the world.
Yeah, that's what
bit of a.
Okay.
What are you saying before?
Yeah, that.
So 2 years. No, but you have to do it. Okay. What were you going to talk about? What's the experience? It's just an experience. I watched it yesterday. Yeah, I took 3 months. 3 months off. It's only 3 months.
Southeast London girls are like,
I think Jimi Hendrix died in Newcastle. The former leader of the Australian Freedom Party was a doctor who identified the body.
You're all good. Is Sonia know? Are you doing the live stream? Who's doing the live stream? Wait.
Interested, I'll send you a stuff over my years ago for Southern years about Pablo Fanca. No story about Pablo Fanca.
Before we let people in, what's happening with the live stream?
It's live right now. Do we need someone to chat on it?
Oh, to chat? You mean to mediate it?
I'm watching it.
Huh?
I'm watching it right now. Just to
What do you want, Sonia?
Built tournament in parks, they just took the headstones out.
she wants to do photos.
So you want Sonia to do the photos, but you
I don't know how many you want. Just take.
Oh, no, it's okay. But you've taken care of the live stream, yeah? She doesn't need to do anything.
Yeah, just leave it.
Awesome.
If you go into the library, you can see a statue just open back in the window. They don't have.
Oh.
Have you been to Australia before?
We've done quite some things. We use it probably once every 3 weeks.
She's going to use her own camera.
That's fine.
Okay. Thank you so
If you
much.
go up to the Paramount, there's a place on Cornwall Street. There's 2 places. One is the Paramount Lounge, it used to be the old screen room of Paramount Cinemas, and they've got an old Art Deco cinema downstairs and a cocktail bar. And then on the corner, just at the end, is the so a lady there, Doris, she's about 87. She was in the Road to Men, she was starring in the Hollywood movie, and she didn't get cast until 64. Thank you.
got to give me live, right?
Hi Felix, nice to meet you.
Yeah, whatever.
Lena, who did we meet from the British Council that time? In the Opera House?
Oh, Abbott, yes, I used to work with him.
That was lovely.
Yeah.
I'm not very good with the names.
I'm called Deborah.
Yes, yes. Where we were sitting. Hey, Annie, how are you doing?
Thanks very much.
Weirdly, I was
Yep.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Eamon Flack. I'm the Artistic Director here at Belvoir Street. We're the host today. We're just the host, though. This is our venue. I'm here to listen and to be a student and just to introduce as the host. Before I do that, this is Aboriginal land. It always was and it always will be. This used to be a storytelling hill once upon a time, and it still is, at our best, a home for storytelling, not just of people at the top end of town, but hopefully for as many people as we can possibly invite in. And that's sort of what we're going to be hearing talked about today, which is how to kind of make the most open possible invitation to audiences and to artists. There's two jobs that I think any arts organisation exists to do. One is to support the best artists, and the other is to represent the world that we live in. And it's clear, I think, to many people, artists, organisations, funding bodies, policy people, audiences, that at the moment Australia's arts organisations aren't managing to do that as well as we really ought to be and really could be. And that acknowledgement is the kind of first step, hopefully, of making some pretty serious change. I'm not going to say anything more. I'm here today just to listen. But I am very pleased that I get to listen to someone who has such a wealth of experience and has been a champion for so many, many years. Deborah has worked in the UK. She's currently the CEO of the Creative Diversity Network. But also you've been a champion of these questions, and you've formed policy and demanded change and demanded people got their shit together at organisations all through the United Kingdom, throughout Europe. You've been to Australia before, you've done this in the United States. We're here today to listen to you, so my thank you for coming. Sunil Badami is a great champion of storytelling here in Sydney. Last time we ran into each other was in the very early morning after Canning and Cracking about a month ago. It's nice to meet in daylight hours. But Sunil, I mean, I wasn't going to read these, but it is just worth, quite apart from the fact you've written for all sorts of publications, like dailies, periodicals of all sorts and all sorts of things. It also says at the end, which I didn't notice, although I kind of caught this vibe. A self-described bon vivant raconteur and flaneur. He's worked as a trainee circus clown, a sous chef in a pub, a financial planner, the manager of an adult shop, and the last ever grand champion of the long-running Australian quiz show Temptation.
I know, but sadly for my mother, I'm still not a dermatologist.
So, Sunil will be talking with Deborah. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Eamon. And thank you everyone for coming along. I'm delighted to welcome you this afternoon. And like Eamon, I too would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians on whose land we now meet, and pay my respects to elders both past and present. Now, before we begin, a few short housekeeping announcements. Please turn off your mobiles. We'll put them to silent. And please don't record the session. If you are taking photos, please turn off your flash. Please be mindful of our discussion and your fellow attendees, and if you do need to duck out early before we conclude, just position yourself near the aisles so you're not treading on anyone's feet as you make a dash for the door. There will be ample time for questions at the end of our chat, and I should say that I will be looking for a question, not a statement, rumination or meander, and listening out for the inflection at the end, okay? But there will also be ample time for discussion and networking over drinks after our conversation. I don't know if I can really add to Eamon's introduction. I mean, Deborah has got such a resplendent CV. She's an award-winning actor, theatre director, writer with over 3 decades of experience as a practitioner and a performer in the performing and screen and stage arts in the UK, including running her own theatre companies and teaching stage management. She is the CEO of the Creative Diversity Network and developed and delivered their Diamond Diversity Monitoring Scheme, which is actually the first and only broadcasting initiative where competing broadcasters collect and publish diversity data together, and also provides databases and online resources for all major UK broadcasters who are members of the network. Prior to that, Deborah worked as the diversity manager. Should I stop now? I was getting to your star sign and everything.
Stop it.
Do you know what? I have to tell you, and Teak was reminding me of this, I actually was being downstairs not only reminds me of all the great shows I've seen here, but also having performed here, doing a storytelling show for William Yang, the acclaimed photographer and storyteller. And I have to tell you, his only note for me was, "Shut up, Sunil." I feel like I'm back home. Thanks, Deborah.
You're welcome.
So before we begin and have our conversation, Deborah, I'd like to hear a little bit of your thoughts and what you'd like to say.
I don't know. I've been at the harbour today, just sort of wandering around, being near water, because I'm sort of going through a bit of a grieving process at the moment. I lost a family member 5 weeks ago, and it's sort of so it's incredibly difficult being so far away from home. And my way of centering myself is being around water. And this word that's been troubling me since I got here, or since before I got here, is leader. It's a word I object to, but it's a word that is being inflicted on me more and more as I do more of this work. And I feel disrespectful for pushing it away. But at the same time, I'm like, well, okay, if I have to accept it, let me accept it in a way that works for me and something that works for me. So I'm going through lots of different thought processes as what sort of leader am I a leader? Okay, and if I am, what sort of leader am I? And it's sort of, it makes me wonder why we need leaders to do this stuff. Why there has to be just one person standing out from everybody else doing this stuff. Why can't everybody just think like me and do like me? And it would be so much easier.
I wish people would drive like me.
You know, it's that, and I'm at that point now where I just go, just everyone just do what I do, and it'll be so much easier, and just save so much aggro on so many different levels. That's kind of where I'm sitting at the moment.
So what do you want to do now?
I just sit next to, I'm in the process of writing my first piece of work that I haven't written for 10 years. And I'm in the process of writing, and I'm embarrassed to say it because of at least one person in the room who I know, of writing a musical. And I've never written a musical before, so I'm in the process of figuring out how I go about writing a musical. But a very black, camp, queer, disabled musical about 1969, because that's the year I was born. So I was born Stonewall weekend, and the week before, what's her face, Judy Garland died with her head, vomiting in a toilet. The week after, Brian Jones died. A couple of months before, Hair had come to life, and a couple of months after, you had the Manson murder. So you had this amazing year, and in the middle of that year, I was born. And I think that says something. And I think there's a show in that. So I'm in the process of writing, of trying to find time to write show. So that's what I'd like to do next. I'd like to stop, talking about diversity and to go back to making work and going, this is what I mean when I say, you need to open your doors, you need to think about your policy, you need to change how and who you recruit, and as funders you need to stop giving money to people who don't do anything apart from please themselves in every way possible. So that's what I'd like to be doing. That's what I want to be doing. But at the moment, I'm still talking about that in for me, it feels like in an abstract way. But I'm very aware that a lot of people have never even thought like this, let alone lived a career like this.
Why is that? Is it because you're so unique, or other people?
Yeah, I am. I think that's really important to acknowledge. I think I am unique, but I'm unique in my own way, if that makes sense. The uniqueness that I bring, I guess, is that I like to do that with other people. I don't like success being or achieving for myself. I like to achieve for and with other people. And there aren't many artists who do that, because inherently we're selfish people, artists. It's about us. And when I realised that I didn't like the attention that came from being an artist, I know, ludicrous, but I didn't. I quite like to be able to share that with other people, and for other people to gain from that, and not just me. I realised that as a practitioner, there was something different in my approach to things and my understanding of what value there was in the art that I produced.
So how has your work as a practitioner kind of influenced or informed your work as an administrator, and vice versa?
I think the way I work as an artist, so as a writer, for example, I have a very long gestation period. I don't write anything for long periods of time. I live with the voices in my head, and then when as someone else in the room will attest, when I write my first draft, it's very tight, and it's very angst-ridden like this, and I'm like, that's it. It's like having a great poo. And there it is. And I'm like, there you are, ta-da. Then you need to sift through it and find the good bits. So to speak. But but once it's out, it's out. And I am, once it's out, it's out, and then you can really ferret your way through it. And as an artist, that's what I do, and I throw stuff away really quickly as well. I don't mind throwing things away if they don't work, and changing and working at a rate of knots. And I think it's interesting trying to do that work like that as a low-level manager. But when you're running an organisation and you have people dependent on you and you don't speak to people for days on end, and then suddenly you go blah, 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 and everyone now sits around me. There's only 4 people in the organisation, but they sit around, and when they ask me a question, they're all sitting at typewriters, and they go and they start typing because I will just spit stuff out at them. So it's quite an interesting approach for, that's the cold front. But when I'm working with people, when I try my best to work with people, I always want to give space to them. I always ask questions that mean that they can answer and they can figure out things for themselves. I'm not much of a dictator. I'm a dictator in terms of that's the way we're going, but the route we take, I'm very open to anyone guiding us along that route, because my route's been like that. I've not had a straight road, so I don't expect to do anything in a straight road. Which, for me it's quite pleasurable and quite enjoyable, because it means I learn as well as at the same time as do. And for most people I come into contact with, it's also, they enjoy it, but there are people who don't get that, who expect, the expectations are different expectations. So I tend to discard them, because I don't have time for people who don't do things like that. I'm too old, I'm just too old for that now. It's like, no, sorry, I've hit that 0, and it's like, yeah, I'm now officially an elder, so you have to respect me. But you want to
Look, before we get into the discussion, I have to tell you straight out, I am a little bit kind of wary of these discussions about diversity, right? Because not only do I feel bad for my well-meaning white friends who have to sit through them, right, and feel bad, present company accepted. But I also kind of worry, because I'm always getting asked to speak on these diversity panels about diversity, that they can kind of pigeonhole those of us who are considered to be cows, right? As though we're kind of privileged informants about these issues relating to diversity. So I wonder, how can we kind of approach these questions or discussions, not only in terms of diversity, but also in terms of inclusiveness?
It goes back to what I said at the beginning about this notion of being a leader. That's why I just it's uneasy with me. So my approach is always start with the art and always start with the work, because the work speaks for itself. And I think with the work, you are, people should be able to say I like or I do not like, and it should not be about the cowled or non-cowled makeup of the company, of the work, of the content. It should be about whether or not people have got their craft right and they are working at the top end of that, or at least they have ambition to work at the top end of that. And if that's not the conversation you're having, then for me you're having the wrong conversation. And a lot of people, I hate it. I made a commitment before I got this job that I would never talk about diversity again. And then I took a job running a diversity organization. And I was like, oh shit, wow. So I have to make stuff up now. But it's, and I like the word diversity. I've been, since I've been here, I've been using the Merritt Chase, the William Merritt Chase quote about diversity. It's about it being about all of us here together. Trying to find ways for that to happen. It's not about tolerating something that you think is, you shouldn't have to tolerate. And that to me is diversity, is that, the best part of theatre making for me is the rehearsal room, is because you're throwing ideas up and other people are throwing ideas up, and sometimes they clash and sometimes they meet and you go, wow, and something else happens, or out of 5 ideas, another 5 will come, and that's diversity, and that's how I try to work in the management space, whether that's with government or policymakers, or as a funder, or supporting other artists, or trying to get through, to the white guilt, which is sort of is real and it's genuine, and I get it, and I'm like, well, that's your guilt, not mine. You know, sorry, but if you feel guilty, get a therapist. I'm not your therapist. I can't be. You're not going to pay me enough to be your therapist. I'm going to solve those sorts of problems that you're bringing up. And then sometimes just step away. You know, I have friends who have just stepped away completely from it. And the worst thing, and it is the worst thing, that the hierarchy that lives, that somehow is festered inside the space, means that you will have people who talk around and about ethnicity and race as if it's the be-all and end-all. And then you will have people talk about gender as if it's the be-all and end-all, and not understand the interconnectedness and that other intersection, you know, that people talk about, and ignore that. So it's like you're always going back to square one with a lot of people. You know, you've done the race thing and you get to a certain point, and then you start talking about, you know, black women or women, and they go, oh, I don't understand. So you have to go back to square one and start over again, and then, oh, and then talk about disability. Oh, I don't understand. So you go back to square one. And all the time you're doing this, you're wasting, you know, the energies that you could be sharing as artists and practitioners and as policymakers. And that's the bit that I get really, really annoyed with. Is when people refuse to understand and accept that different sorts of underrepresentation live within one space and should be allowed to live within one space.
I mean, how can we kind of, you know, address that underrepresentation, especially on stage and on screen, you know? I mean, growing up in Australia, you would have thought that Ramsay Street had been settled by the boys from Brazil or the Hitler Youth, but, you know, I never saw anyone who looked like me on Australian TV for years. How do we get, of course things are getting better, we've got the family law, we've got, you know, black comedy, we've got lots of representation, but it seems as if there's still a long way to go. How do we kind of improve that underrepresentation?
I think one of the things is to celebrate what you have achieved. And I think it's the thing that hit us in the UK, was that people didn't celebrate what they'd achieved until it was all gone. You know, especially around black theatre in particular, there was very little celebration of what had been achieved. So celebrate what you achieve and celebrate what has been achieved, because somewhere someone was working incredibly hard for that to happen. And usually that someone is burnt out somewhere, you know, in a padded cell, hugging himself, going, yeah, I remember the days of. I remember the Nazi youth in Home and Away, and Neighbours, and going, I solved that. So celebrate. I think that's really important. I think the second bit of that is know the history, is know how people did that. So some people would have done it behind closed doors and you would never know who they are. Some people would have done it by activism and by really shouting from the front, you know, standing outside your TV studios with placards, you know, like you used to do in the 70s and 80s. And some people would have been writing, slowly but surely, just writing character after character and changing the demographic, the makeup of a character, or swapping the identity of one character within, you know, a street scene or something like that. So people, those little increments have happened and they're important. I think the other side of it is policy. I think policy is your friend, and legislation is your friend, and there are very few people in this space who can read policy and understand policy and interpret it for our industries. So those people are gems, and then you need to find them. If you don't know who they are already, and just, you know, nail their feet to the floor and make them interpret policy in a way that says you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do the other, building it into criteria of how you select and who you meet. You know, these industries are born of, you know, meeting people, consuming alcohol or other things, bodily fluids or whatever, in dark rooms. They are. So we have to figure out a way to make let's not stop that, because there's nothing really wrong with that. and that would, you know, that would end most of our sex lives. But but how do we just extend that beyond, you know, the usual orgy crew? You know, it's like, I mean, think of it back like swinging, right? Where people turn up, you put all your keys in a bowl, right? You want different keys in the bowl every single time. So you get a bigger group of people, so eventually you pull out set of keys that you don't know that belong to, and then you can have some fun. And I think that's how you do it, is make sure that the networking events and things that you go to
Which sounds great, and I guess we've got so many different ways of presenting work, you know, so many different media, you know, and we look at, say, the democratising effect of YouTube, where anybody with an iPhone can suddenly make a movie or create an audience, you know, or unwrap a toy and make $25 million a year, right? So, but in a way also, isn't there a kind of greater fragmentation when we've got so many more channels? How do we kind of create what Barack Obama called cultural leitmotifs or touchstones that unite us?
God, that's a big question.
I know, I took a long time to ask it, didn't I?
I forgot where it started, but no.
Keys in the bowl.
Keys in the bowl. Right?
How do we go from lots more keys in the bowl to getting somewhere together?
Okay. So that's what, you know, my organisation, the Creative Diversity Network, sort of does that. At the moment we only have 13 keys in the bowl, and we're looking to extend that. But what that means is, what it is that you take away competition in the space. So we are now collaborating in the space instead of competing in the space. We are trying to find the best that is out there in terms of practice, in terms of content makers and on and off screen talent. But we're doing that in a way where we're thinking about an industry, we're not thinking about a business. So no individual business is thinking, I'm trying to encourage them to not think about an individual business gain. I'm thinking about long-term industrial gain. Because content is king, as we know now at the moment. And if you are any good at what you do, someone somewhere with a Netflix, you know, bag, with a black bag with a red N on it, will open a bag and shove a few $1 million onto your nose and say, I want, you know, you want a series, and most people go yes to that. And that takes away from your traditional TV spaces. So in the traditional TV and broadcast spaces, what are you filling them with? Are you going to go back and fill them with strange white people that nobody can relate to anymore? Or do you need to really think about, okay, that didn't work because our audience numbers have gone down, our bottom lines have gone down, our revenue and our advertising have gone down. We need them to flip the other way, and the only way for that to really work is around diversity, and it's around people targeting audience that you have targeted in the past with content that they want to see, not what you think they should be watching, and that's the difference. And it's a massive mind fuck for people, because they go, no, but everybody wants to see this, and I'm like, no, they do not. I've been watching television a little bit since I've been here, and I've watched the Sunday night takeaway with an old white man and an even older white woman, no disrespect. But in the UK, that's done by two northern,
Ed and Dick.
Yeah, right. So I don't understand how you can go from Ant and Dec to what, Mike and Jane or whatever they're called. I do apologise because I can't remember what their names are. I don't understand how you can take that format and do that with it here and not see the problem. You know, that should be, you know, First Nations straight up and down. Young First Nations running the roost and taking the mickey out of absolutely everything that this country is about. Because that's what the Sunday night slots are for. And I watched it and I cringed when I see the adverts. I'm just cringing, going, why is this how is this possible? And why have you done that?
But, I mean, when we look at the idea of audiences or present plays or shows or films reflecting their audiences, I mean, wouldn't you say that the productions that are being made effectively reflect the decision makers and the producers and the commissioners and the editors who make those decisions? Well, I mean, there's been a lot of controversy, especially in the light of, say, someone like Lionel Shriver, who believes that her right to tell someone else's story is greater than her responsibility to them. as she tells it. How do those people, we know that a lot of the people at the top of the Australia Council or Create New South Wales or funding bodies and production companies, they're well-meaning and they're also white. How do they make that call about what they think, how can they make that call about what kind of stories they think audiences who don't look like them or have different experiences or perspectives may want to watch?
They shouldn't be. It's as simple as that. They just shouldn't be. A lot of people at the top end, sitting in the C-suites and the executives, not shouldn't be there, but they shouldn't be making those decisions in isolation. I think one of the things about when I created the diversity standards for the BFI in the UK, it was about encouraging people to think from the very start of the process about diversity. And you had 4 spaces that you could operate in: on screen, off screen, sort of development, and then distribution and audiences. And you had to pick at least 2 of those spaces where you would make a concerted effort to have diversity at the core of what you were doing. And I think the decision makers, when you present them with something different, it's incredibly difficult for them to say, no, have you thought about? And the more they do that, the more it becomes clear that they're the barriers and they're the gatekeepers. But that has to be give and take, because one of the things that I found is that demonising all white people at the top of their industries doesn't help you, because people just grab on and hold on for dear life. So what you do are find the allies, or find the people who are genuine, find the people who are interested, find the people who want change to happen, and work with them to facilitate the change, whilst not ignoring, but paying less attention to the people who don't want that to happen. And I think one of the things that I like to do is to talk to people on their terms about what it is they're already doing, and how you change what it is they know, as opposed to inventing something new and going, okay, you've got to do this now. Whereas actually, if you're working with people from where they are, which is probably further down the food chain than you are, then it becomes embedded, it becomes second nature to them, it becomes something that they do as you walk away. Because the last thing I want is to have to sit on everyone's shoulder and constantly go, no, you need to do this, no, you need to do this, no, you need to do this, forever and a day. I don't have that kind of energy, and I don't have that kind of goodwill. And it is goodwill that makes you do that, because nobody will pay you to do that. Nobody will pay you to sit on the shoulders of the CEO of Create Australia and say, no, don't do that, no, don't do that. To be the good and bad angel.
In the day.
Yeah. No one will pay you to do that. You have to want to do that, and you have to give your time to doing that. So, showing people that success can come, is possible from serving an underrepresented audience with a story that they wish to hear, as opposed to feeding them a story that you think is right for them. That it works. Now, the big things that have hit have been things like Black Panther, things like Klansman, things like some of the films that have come out, Moonlight, some of the movies that have come out globally in the last 2-3 years that have shown that by telling different stories and by the authors and the auteurs being of those groups makes a massive difference. And my absolute bugbear is news, is how people report things. We have the orange baby, that side of the pond for you guys, that side for me, but the orange baby going on and on and on and on and on and on about himself all the time. And for some reason, people put that on 24-hour news channels. And I'm like, well, no, you give it 5 minutes and say the orange baby said this today, and then you move on. And that, for me, is what news should be. News should be reporting, the fires, what's happening out in the Pacific, what's happening in the Atlantic. Even the B word that we're living with. I'm like, we don't care. We really don't care. It's a mess. That's all you need to put. That's your headline. It's a mess. No one knows what's going on. Move on. What is really happening in the world? But giving so much oxygen to these things makes them become far more important and far more relevant than they are. And that's one of the problems. So giving oxygen to people who say, I can tell any story I want and you have no right to. I'm like, come here and let me do this. Well, get over it. You know, I mean, seriously, I mean, look, because it's wrong. And the fact that people get commissions to do those things and are not challenged, you know, from the strap on a pair and call these people out for what they are. Thieves. They are thieves. And they are cultural thieves. Stealing someone else's creativity and someone else's story is one of the biggest thefts of all time. And we know that. You know, life, it's not like we don't know what it's like to you know, history or geography or any of these things. It's not like we've not seen it before. We see it over and over and over again. And someone needs to stand up and go, no, I'm sorry. Not interested, mate. Soz. See you later. I don't care how much money your last film brought in, there's no guarantee this one's going to bring the same amount. Sorry.
But, I mean, how do we go beyond, you know, obviously, like I work in corporate, for corporates, right? So a big thing about the corporate world is now talking about diversity and inclusion, right? Because they can see that it's very profitable, you know, in terms of being able to cherry pick particular demographics. But how do we go beyond, but when we talk about art and culture, I mean, you need money to make it, but we make it for more than the money. So how do we go beyond commodifying diversity as a kind of box-ticking exercise that helps us hit particular key demographics to ensure maximum profitability?
With me, it's culture change. It's the culture, it's the mindset of the people that do the work. And I have to admit, I don't have a problem with starting with the commodity, because ultimately we all want good work, right? And we all want the best, and we all want to make money and live good lives. So I don't mind starting there. My issue is that that's all you do, that you stop. But when people stop there, that's when it becomes problematic. And I think that unless you're looking at changing mindsets, unless you're looking at shifting cultures, unless you're looking at saying, I do not know here, you will have an answer to this that I don't have, and giving far more space and time to others, and not others, but other people, other individuals.
The other kind of other.
Yeah, the other kind of other. Not other, not other.
No, the other.
That group.
That other.
That other.
Not those.
Unless you do that, yes, that's it. That, not those. Unless you do that, you're just never. It's never going to move, and it's never going to shift. And you know, the work that I do, you know, the work sitting with the, you know, so the group of my board members are the chief executives and the director general of the five UK biggest broadcasters, the PAT, the production community, BAFTA, all of these organisations. They sit in a room, and it's taken me 2 years, but they listen to what I say. Now they don't have to, right? They've employed me. They could tick a box, they could put me in a corner, and we could do some jiggery pokery and move things around, and they could go, great, every quarter, it's all lovely. But they don't. They want to know what I think they should be doing, what the best approach is, because they want to embed it within their organisations, so that when they move on, it's still there, and it still exists inside the organisation that they've started working in. Not when the individual goes, everything goes with them, which is what tends to happen with diversity. It's usually a passion project for one individual, and when they leave, it goes with them. So that's the big thing, and that's the big change that I've noticed, is that actually they want to know how to embed this in their HR system and processes, in their recruitment, in their staffing policies, or work that they have done already around particular groups. Internally, how do they extend that, and how do they let people outside know that, you know, we're doing a discrete piece of work for one of the organisations at the moment around locations. So how do you make your locations actually physically accessible to disabled people, but B, how do you then let disabled people who potentially you want to employ know that that your entire process is taking into account their access requirements from the minute you write the job description. And that's a big task, but if you get that right within any organisation, it should be, all you then do is every 2 or 3 years you tweak it, you don't have to go back to the beginning and start all over again. And you know, when someone new comes in, there is a foundation for them to work on and build on. And that's what I like about what I'm doing, and that's happening at an industrial level. That you know the core planks of the industry in the UK are trying to make that happen and trying for that to be how they do things as a regular, not a one-off.
So what kind of impact has the Creative Diversity Network made in terms of the culture in broadcasting and the kind of productions that are coming out now?
The more than anything, people talk. So whereas everyone used to be very positive and very closed about what productions they were doing and who they were working with, people are beginning to share talent, definitely, and have a conversation about talented people. So if they're working with 9 writers or developing 9 writers or directors, they are at least beginning to share with each other. This person, they're great, but in the genres that we're not looking for, so they might be good for your genre. And the work we did around the commissioner programme, there was also, I think now 16, 17 commissioners across the 5 broadcasters from diverse backgrounds who had all sorts of been in different spaces. One person jumped from Sky to Channel 5 and from 5 to ITV and such like that. So when they finished the programme, so they're beginning to understand that the strength lies with them working together, not pulling each other apart. And as we're beginning to work on larger projects and larger industrial projects, they defer a lot more to me. But they defer a lot more to me than they did 18 months ago when I first started, because they know I'm not going to lead them down the wrong path, or they trust I'm not going to lead them down the wrong path.
So who is creative diversity for? Is it for producers seeking new audiences? Is it for underrepresented audiences? Is it for underemployed writers and practitioners? Who exactly is this creative diversity meant to help?
It's about industrial change, and it's why I took the job. Unless the industry wants to change and wants to move away from the way it's done things, I'm not interested. So production companies can come to me and we can talk. And I can talk in private or I can talk in public. Direct producers can come to me, broadcasters can come to me. Agents come and talk to me. Anyone can come and talk to me about what they're struggling with around diversity, and we can have a conversation about the impact that has, the small things they can do that will have a larger impact on the industry, and just certain things they stop doing. I mean, there's a whole thing around language, and people, especially at the moment around gender, there's a whole thing around language around gender at the moment. So we're having a conversation around trans, non-binary, what gender means, and the use of the word female and what the implications are, and the connotations for that in terms of excluding people. And we're just beginning that conversation, but we're having it. And I think it's important that we have it, because and it's important that people shout at me. I don't always shout back, but sometimes I do. But it's also because then at least I know what we're missing. I know the bits of it, the things that we're missing. But if it's the same people shouting the same thing they were shouting 20 years ago, I know they're just not very good at their job, and they're just not very talented. Because if you haven't moved on in your thinking in 20 years, no matter which side of the fence you're sitting on, there is an issue around you within the space, not around the space around you.
So what's the uptake in the industry in terms of coming to you? What kind of growth or changes have you seen in the 18 months that you've been receiving?
I'm tired. That's the key thing. I'm just really worn out. It was a small group of people. It's 5 of us. There's 4 or 5 of us, right? I'm the only full-time member of staff. Everyone else is part-time, and I more calls to do discrete pieces of work for people. More calls for me to go and do these sorts of things within production companies, within broadcast spaces, within staff networks. Far more conversations on the phone with people around. People know that they can just call me and ask. I think we haven't done, because I've not been doing it for long enough, and the metrics weren't in place when we started. For what the impact could be, we don't know, but we are now starting to work with academics and start to think about what metrics we need and what measures we need to be thinking about for what impact, for measuring long-term impact of this way of working and this approach to diversifying an industry and changing a complete industry in the way it works.
So what about other initiatives like, say, the Screen Diversity Inclusion Network in Australia? What have you seen in relation to the work that they do in Australia, and how do you see that in relation to what you do at CDN?
Well, they copied us. To be clear about that. They copied everything we do. So
great artists don't borrow, do they?
No. They steal. So 2 years ago when I came, I first came when I came to Melbourne, when Ashton's brought me over and I came to Melbourne. It was a sort of, we had some close conversations, and it was people quite anxious, and Diamond had just published, and we maintained contact with them over the last 2 years, and they are now in the process of building their own version of Diamond, and enjoying it. And all that comes with trying to build a system when you have so many different legal teams, trying to make sure that their organisation doesn't get into trouble. They have a paid member of staff, which they didn't have 2 years ago. And I think the more people are beginning to accept that this is the way things have to go, need to go, in order for them to reach the widest audiences possible, and to maintain their relevance. So that's been quite interesting to see over the last few years where that sits. There's a long way to go, and I'm quite proud that people keep saying, oh, we're modelling it on CDN, and we think that's great, because it means that I can eventually stop doing this, because it's the next generation. It's in good hands. Whoever's taking it over, and I think that's important. And the commitment's there, and it's a real, genuine commitment. I haven't met anyone yet who's not committed. I've met lots of people who are scared and petrified and terrified about what the implications of this are, but I haven't met anyone yet who's not actually committed.
What are the implications?
The implications are they lose their jobs, they lose their status, they lose everything that they think makes them who they are.
I mean, I guess the big thing is like with Netflix, it costs it costs you $14, $12 or $13 a month in Australia, and you can get an immense amount of content that isn't necessarily geo-blocked. But the scale of economy in theatre means that the price of a ticket often, excludes a lot of people. And so how does theatre, which it still needs to make money, be able to tell stories to underrepresented audiences who may not be able to afford the ticket, and still keep, the largely affluent, largely white, largely elderly who can come to a matinee kind of audience, still engaged?
So this goes right back to when I first started. So when I first started, I wasn't just performing, I was also stage managing. And I used to work at the Pleasance in Edinburgh. And the way the Pleasance did it was that you would have the big boys take up the space they wanted first, and then they'd hold 2 small spaces. Basically, Christopher would give them to artists for nothing. So you didn't have to pay. And the first few artists were people like Graham Norton, who had no money. His first show when he came to Edinburgh, and we were pushing his first show at the box office so that he could at least walk away with a few £100. This is back in the early 90s. And then people like Lana and Woodley and the Doug Anthony All-Stars and all the guys, and Bob Down and all of the comics and all the people that came from Australia who came with nothing, but they knew that if they sweet talk Christopher, they could get either a cabaret bar space or an upstairs space, sort of sit 40 people, fill it out for 4 weeks, and you break even, but it doesn't cost you anything up front. And I hold on to that spirit in theatre. And I think theatre's lost its mind. It lost its mind in the mid-noughties, when it became clear that what you could do. First of all, when Australian soap stars started travelling, and so all those white Nazis and Hitler youth started turning up in my country and doing panto, right, and doing seasonal shows. And then suddenly it's like, whoa, because that's what, it was for the house. Basically, it was for the house. And that's what the people were trying to do, fill houses. That's all they were trying to do. and you decided that you expect a big show for a big house, whereas actually what you need is a big show for a small house, and that helps you in terms of your basic economics. And then where my heart sank was when people started regurgitating old scripts, old screen films and old stories, and just putting the same stuff on over and over and over again. And I just, for some reason, the writer became irrelevant in theatre, because new writing was perceived to be such a risk, and is perceived to be such a risk. And I would like for that to change. Because crazy old people going to theatre isn't going to keep you open. And I think, the National Theatre in the UK are discovering that the new Dorfman space, that they have to make it a slightly less, you have to charge less money, you have to seek sponsorship, although that gets you into trouble because there's so few businesses that you can get sponsorship from who are ethical, who do not have a bad background, that it's complex. But what I am seeing is a new group of people who are leading theatres in the UK in particular, who come with a different understanding, who come with the idea that long-term investment in artists is your way forward. So actually, you can fill a house with, the run-of-the-mill stuff, as long as within your programme you've got 25-30% that you give over to space that potentially won't make any money, that nobody will come to see, that that will actually develop the artist and nurture the culture of your organisation much more than bombs on seats and making that work. And it's finding the balance. And as they go, I'm hoping that more theatres will flip itself around, so it's 70-30 the other way. But I do think that people have stopped appreciating theatre, whereas I still love theatre, so I still love to go to theatre and the whole experience of it. But I think a lot of people, it's a tablet, and that generation who go, it's a tablet, I press one button, and I can watch anything I want to, whenever I want to watch it. That generation, I think we need to do a lot of work with them to understand that it's not either or, it's an and. There is a different experience you have. That shared experience when you go to theatre is just as important and just as critical and just as vital as the shared experience you have when watching Game of Thrones or any of those things, which I've never watched. So but those sorts of things on tablets and tablet.
Look, we've had a lot of discussion in Australia. We talk about Australia being a tolerant society. Like, I tolerate my children watching YouTube videos, right? How do we move? We've talked a lot about how we get to where we want to go. But ultimately, I guess a lot of us are concerned about the fact that while we want to celebrate our difference, we also want to connect universally without that smothering assimilation. How do we move beyond cows, and we talked about how we get there, but where do we ultimately want to go?
I don't know. I have no idea. To a certain extent, that's the beauty of it, is because we don't know, and it's something we can design together. We should be able to design together and create together. But I guess it's where we're not. It's where we're not. I struggle when people say, "Oh, I want to celebrate my difference," because do you? Do you really want to do that? Is that all you want to do? That's quite boring, isn't it? Sitting around with people like you. But maybe that's, for some people, that's where they start. I mean, what I like is watching and then thinking, if ever I manage to do a PhD, so that's what I want to do a PhD about. It's about how the niche impacts the world. And I also do a PhD about reggae music, right? And the largest Caribbean island, a very niche thing, but how it has transcended the world, and what it has done, and the impact of reggae music on commercials. I see commercials now on television, anywhere I go in the world, and there's a little bit of a reggae beat in there, and people talking about peppers and all this stuff, but all of it comes from the large island, which is a very tiny island, a tiny piece of the world that has impacted so greatly. And I'm always and I'm very interested in how the niche impacts the great. And there's nothing wrong with celebrating and working with a niche. You know, a story like Moonlight, you know, that's a very niche story, but it transcended everything because the people who made that film were talented, had good craft, and they sought to deliver the best that they could. And that's the difference between where we are and where we want to be.
Wow, so I think we should give a little bit of a round of applause to the very I'm sure you've all got lots of questions for Deborah. So if you do have a question, raise your hand, speak loudly so when I give you the nod. Speak loudly, I'll try and repeat the question so it gets on the film. Again, because time's limited, please limit yourself to a question, not a rumination or a statement. And if you do go on, I will be forced to wind you up, like William Yang often did when I was here at rehearsals. But don't worry, there will still be time for chats, conversations, networking and drinks after the session. So, any questions?
Thank you very much. I guess I'd be interested in your theoretical and academic influences.
Mine?
Yeah, yours. You just mentioned PhD and you started with this beautiful story being contemplated this morning or today. So thinking is a part of your world, and what kind of theoretical academic influences have guided you?
That's a very quite difficult for me to answer because I don't have an education, so
Doesn't mean you don't read.
yeah, but I wouldn't consider. I read plays, right? I read plays. I guess the biggest influence was my mother, I think, and my grandmother. So my grandmother travelled from Jamaica to the UK, studied as a teacher. She had Shakespeare books on her bookshelf. She had books in Latin and Greek. Wasn't allowed to teach, but I would always pull the Shakespeare book off the shelf. So I started reading when I was sort of 11, 12, and I read plays. So it was really plays. So I guess within that space it would be Shakespeare's in there, Bernard Shaw, Eugene O'Neill, who else do I like? Pinter, Harold Pinter. I love Harold Pinter. So crazy old white men who sort of had warped ideas of the world around them and wanted change but didn't know that that's what they were doing. You know, I met Harold Pinter late on in his life, and it was weird because he was a very short Jewish man, and it was quite weird to sort of meet this small man who was for so long had impacted on me. I think I just hang around now. Last 10 years I've hung around academics. So Mike Oliver, who passed away recently, who was the granddad of the social model of disability, and the whole unit at Leeds University, who just sort of placed the idea that being disabled was a social construct as opposed to it being some problem with the individual. So I just sort of, I'm ravenous. I do read. I'm ravenous about reading, but in terms of academic, it's not an area that's I'm on the periphery, very much on the periphery of academia.
Hi, Deborah, thank you. You mentioned in terms of intersectionality that you'd have a conversation about one aspect and then you'd have to go back and start again. What advice do you have for us not to have to continue doing that?
Don't do it. Really simply, and I think one of the things that when I started the work with the BFI, I said to people, look, most of us, if not all of us, live with between 4 and 5 intersects. So how can you possibly only ever talk about one you? If you are talking about you, you're talking about you as a parent, as a sibling, as an aunt, an uncle. You're talking about yourself within your marital status. You're talking about yourself within your work environment. You're talking about yourself in terms of your sexual orientation and who you sleep with, who you don't sleep with. how old you are, the things you remember, the things you don't remember on television, all of those things. You talk about those all the time. That is intersection. That is diversity. So at the start of the conversation, you know, just think of that as your starting point. Not I'm entering this room and talking as a woman about this thing. Or I'm entering this room and I was saying earlier, you know, there is nothing wrong with straight white men. There's something wrong with only straight white men. And I think that's the sort of the bit in the back of your head to hold on to. Really, I would suggest. Just don't do it. Just sort of remember the whole you when you enter a room, not just the little bit of you that people think is relevant for that conversation and debate.
Hi Deborah, my name's Dan. I'm actually a theatre director who actually is queer, who also happens to have a disability. And it's only been very recently, as in the last 18 months. I hate saying being pushed because obviously I'm happy to do it, but I've been put into the role of leadership role in terms of disability, etc. And I was just wondering how you find combining your craft, because I've just come back from New York where I had a residency at a theatre company there, whereas when I've come back here, and I hope I'm not putting my foot in it, but I feel I'll be put back in, you know, the disability director, and it's obviously I see myself as many different things, and disability is just one of them, whereas I'm not in a position to put on my own work due to many circumstances.
This is learning to straddle. That's the hardest bit about what I've had to do is to learn to straddle. You know, I came from mainstream commercial theatre as a stage manager, and I went up and I ended up as a practitioner. I'm a disabled artist. Those two for me were two completely different worlds, and I had to learn to straddle and how to slowly but surely begin to bring the other half of me into the room at any given time. And sometimes that means staying absolutely quiet about other things that you do. Because actually, the opportunity that you're faced with when you're sitting in the space you're in here is based on where you are here. It's not necessarily based on the bigger picture. So there's no reason why you have to tell anyone what you did yesterday or what you had for dinner or anything. You just go, okay, well within this space, this is what I'm doing, and you know, I always took it as an opportunity to learn and to continue to learn and develop my craft. You know, the last 10 years I've not really been doing much writing or performing, and in 2015 I had